I'm Matthew McCabe. Welcome to Miracle Voices. Each episode, we will be delving into stories of forgiveness, healing, and transformation that have come about from integrating the principles of the book, A Course in Miracles. If you want to learn more about A Course in Miracles, visit www.acim.org. If you'd like to visit the Miracle Voices site, please go to www.miraclevoices.org. If you feel inspired to make a love offering, please visit us at miraclevoices.org/donate. All donations go to support the work of the Foundation for Inner Peace, the publisher of A Course in Miracles. Now here's your program. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Miracle Voices. I'm Matthew McCabe, here with my co-host, Judy Scutch-Whitson. Judy, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, thanks, Matt. I'm really looking forward to this podcast.
Yes, me too. Jeffrey Cosker, welcome to Miracle Voices. How are you doing today?
Very well. Thank you for having me.
Great. I have so many questions I want to ask you. You're doing really cool things, Jeffrey. But before we get started, why don't you tell us where you are in the world? Where are you sitting right now?
Well, right now I find myself in Nevada, South Reno. I had moved here about a year and a half ago, and this is where I currently call home.
Okay. And I've said
is the fire near you?
There's fires that are about an hour or so away in South Tahoe, but haven't affected us here.
Oh, good. And I've said Nevada a couple times in the past, and I'm always corrected by locals that it's Nevada is the correct. That fat A is the right way to say it.
I'm from the East Coast, so it took me a few months to line up with the Nevada.
Yeah.
Where did you come from in the East Coast?
I grew up in Connecticut. I spent the first 40 years of my life in Connecticut with minor excursions, but for the most part, generally didn't leave New England very much.
Okay.
We're in Connecticut. I'm getting really detailed here because I lived in Connecticut too.
Right in the center. In fact, if you put an X through the state, it would be the direct center. There's a little monument very close to where I lived. It's Cromwell, about 20 minutes south of Hartford.
I know where that is. My husband and I had a summer place for all our children, and we would leave New York City gladly and go to Lake Candlewood.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
So, I just loved it. We traveled up through Connecticut. Well, you picked two very good places.
Sure. I can't take the credit for this one, but.
Well, Jeff, tell us how A Course in Miracles came into your life.
Yeah. So it was about 8 years ago. I had a shift in my life and went into a 12-step recovery program. And as a result of that program, I had a profound experience, what later to find out that the Course calls revelation. And I was into a lot of the spiritual books. Right at the beginning, it's like, it's a flood of these books coming in. Well, the Course in Miracles kept showing up. I bought it. I didn't open it up. I actually opened it up to the first lesson and arrogantly said, yeah, well, no kidding, nothing. Like I had this profound spiritual awakening. I'm like, yeah, I know that. Kind of set it on the shelf. But about 3 weeks later, I walked into a 12-step room. And a gentleman walked in that there was this instant connection with. I mean, my heart was just like, who is this guy? And don't you know, he just got out of prison that day. And he stood up, and when he shared, he spoke the language of the heart. And I was like, so I went right up to him afterwards. And, he said a few things that kind of actually were, he studied A Course in Miracles in prison. And then I didn't know this at the time, but we just talked. And I said, hey, man, let's get together. I said, let's read a book together. We were going to read some of Emmett Fox's books. And so I went home and I had my computer open, and he called me, and I was looking up where I could find A Course in Miracles group because I knew nothing about it. I was like so fresh to it. And he called me to ask, hey, have you ever heard of A Course in Miracles? I said, bro, I'm on the computer right now looking up how to join one of these meetup groups. And so he said, let's read it together. So we got together, sat by the Salmon River, which I'm sure you're familiar with, Judy, if you went through Connecticut.
Yes, I am.
And we went and we set up a couple of chairs and we sat there with the book. And that was the first time I opened it up with another person, where two or more are joined. And it was quite a spiritual experience, just that, I was able to share or try to share. I know they're highly personal, those spiritual experiences, but it was the first time I was able to open up and share it with someone else. And he immediately said, hey, you need to read this, this, and this. And he directed me to Gary's books. And so over the next week, I read all of Gary's books. And then I found out that there was going to be a Course in Miracles conference run by Tony and the Miracle Center there in Manhattan, which was only 2 hours away. So about a week and a half, 2 weeks after I opened A Course in Miracles, I was on my way to Manhattan for the first Course in Miracles conference for me. And that's where I started to meet everyone. The first person I saw talk was David Hoffmeister, who later became a big part of my journey. And that's kind of how it came into my life, and it unfolded rapidly.
Yeah.
I love these stories that people give us their paths in just the beginning, just how you started. And it brings up so many things that are common to so many people. Just when you're ready, it happens. You weren't ready 3 weeks before, but then you went to an AA meeting, and just the sanctity almost of the relationship of you recognizing, I put that in quotes, this other man, and you two becoming study partners is I've heard this so many times, and it happened to me too. So I can really appreciate how important that is. And it's, one of the great lessons of the Course, nothing is by accident. Mm-hmm. Everyone you meet has something specific to do with your life. It's all part of the greater plan. And thank God it is.
Yes, I still speak weekly with that gentleman. We connect every week. So it's been quite a blessing, that relationship.
Jeffrey, can you talk a little bit about the circumstances that led up to the revelatory experience and what was kind of going on? You said you were kind of entering a 12-step program then, but can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. Yeah. So like I had shared, I spent the first 39 years of my life in Connecticut, and my life led to, it was completely based in the material world, but of course it led to serious discontentment, which was covered over with drugs and alcohol. And when I finally, said the three hardest words, which I think is one of the lessons in this lifetime for me, is I need help. And, I would never accept that before. And I said those words to my father, actually. And weeks later, he brought me up to Kent, Connecticut. And there's a 12-step recovery facility there. And for whatever reason, when I went in there, I was ready. And, they say it's darkest before the dawn. Those first nights were extremely terrifying for me. And I knew I was letting go of something big, or something was happening. But for me, what really happened, I think, was, I always thought I was, I had all this shame and guilt and remorse around the things I had done in regards to my drug and alcohol abuse. And I thought I was choosing to do those things. On a conscious level, I thought I'm a bad person because I was choosing these things. When it was laid out to me, I sat and basically it was a family orientation. And so for the 2 weeks prior up to that point, I had been doing the work at the facility. I was, ready to follow directions for the first time in my life, as they're laid out in the 12-step book. And I just started to experience, little synchronicities and a sense of a flow of the spirit. But it was really the weekend that I sat in this room with my mother and father flanking me as we listened to this presenter talk about alcoholism and drug addiction as a disease. And when she said the words, every alcoholic and drug addict has one thing in common, I remember sitting in the chair and hearing my ego like, what is she talking about? And sure enough, she turns to a slide, and a slide comes up on the screen that shows a pencil drawing of a man with his, almost like the screenshot I have here, a man with his hands in his, in his head in his hands, just defeated. And the line just said, I'm not enough. And when I read that for that time, the 2 weeks prior, I had dropped my guard enough to let that arrow into my heart. And I was like, oh my God, this is what's going on underneath it all. And so there was a crack. And over the next 24 hours, that crack grew into a canyon. And I just started to let go. And this idea of letting go of choice, which is a big thing, and people fight for that in recovery. And I was able to see that, well, maybe I was. And then the next thought that came into my mind was, maybe I'm not choosing anything. And my mind just started to blow open along with my heart. The following day, I sat in the same room, and the woman was speaking about enabling. And so she's speaking to the parents and the friends, and I was hearing this stuff for the first time. And I held both my parents' hands in that room for the first time. My father wasn't very affectionate, and I grabbed his hand and my mother's hand, and I said the words. I said, everything's going to be all right. And I mean, I meant it from the bottom of my heart. I knew there had been a shift in my mind, and they kind of looked at me, and about 15 minutes later, she read the 12 steps. And when she read the 12th step, I had, this was the first part of it. This energy just flushed through me, the catharsis. I mean, tears there's nothing you can do. They just come up. And I just started to cry, and this energy flowed through my body. And I was like, and I literally turned to my mother and went, "Mom, God's real." And she goes, I know. I said, "If you knew, you'd never worry again." And I just sat and I cried. And what happened in that moment for me, and looking back, was I was given purpose. I didn't have a purpose in my entire life. And when she read the 12th step of recovery, which is having had a spiritual awakening, we carried this message to the still sick and suffering. And so I said, oh my God, my last 40 years can be used for something. And so that was the beginning of, I walked around, I call the next hours my Eckhart Tolle experience, where I was walking through, snowing in upstate Connecticut. And I looked at everything as if I was seeing it for the first time. There was no past, everything the Course talks about. I was able to wash some of this stuff away with the process of the 4th step, and looking at turning the idea that I'm a victim of the world to, wait, I am doing this to myself, the salvation the Course talks about. And so that all just kind of, resonated, and everything was happening. I walked around for about 4 hours that night, and we watched a movie that night. It was August Rush, and my heart just swelled, because if you've ever watched that movie, it's about hearing the internal guide. Yeah. And I went back to my room, and I sat in my room, and I sat at the edge of my bed, and I didn't realize it wasn't a formal 3rd step the way it's written in the 12-step book, but I sat there and I surrendered my life to a degree. And I can only attribute to this that I was already vibrating at this, like, woo. I was like just feeling, the presence of the Spirit rushing through me. And I said, whatever you'll have me do, I'm yours. Whatever you'll have me be, if I'm supposed to give up my life. And at the time I said, for these people, meaning alcoholics and, drug addicts and so forth. I said, if I'm supposed to give up my life for these people, so be it. When I said the word "so be it," it seemed to happen from my chest, but it was, the world disappeared, and, it's the great raise. There's no words beyond that point. I've tried to put it into words unsuccessfully, many times. And, there was a lot of aspects that coming back from that experience, which it, over the days as I tried to acclimate back, it was a week later that really I was able to, kind of communicate with people, or, it was really profound. But the rushing back to darkness part, when the ego, and it's almost as when I started to read the Course, I was like, yes, like, yes, the second of coming is the recognition in the mind, and the fall of man is the belief in separation. It's almost like I had experienced it, the dissociation and everything coming back. And it was terrifying, actually, coming back to who I thought I was, and, coming back to this little person. But for some reason, I actually share with people, I have 2 tattoos on my back that I got, about 4 years before that experience. And it says, "Lord, grant me the vision of a falcon and the strength of 2 bulls." And I believe those prayers were answered. I was given vision, and I was given the strength to return to who I thought I was at the time. So that was kind of how it happened for me.
Wow, that's incredible. Jeffrey, can't tell you how many people, including myself, have this 12-step background that leads into A Course in Miracles. And it's really profound how that's happened. And they dovetail together, the AA book and the 12-step books with A Course in Miracles, the principles in many regards. Judy, do you have any comments or questions?
Yeah, I'm sort of, as the British would say, gobsmacked because it's such a powerful story and so meaningful and touches upon some of the things I've experienced directly and some of the things other people have talked about in this podcast series. How well prepared we are and don't even know it for that. Please help me. How well prepared we are. If we didn't go through all of that, look what we would have missed. And some people go through life sleepwalking and don't ask those questions and don't have those terrible downs. And then eventually, if they're really blessed, those very high highs. But we all know what it means. We all have a sense of that connection. We all have a sense of wanting to go home, even though the words sound funny, because home usually means a place where we live. But in truth, the place where we live in truth is common to all of us. It's a symbol of our oneness. So hearing this tale of yours up till now, it just is so opening. I feel that I'm wide open and I want to hear more.
Well, let's hear some more. Jeffrey, tell us about your forgiveness story with your dad, if you would.
Yeah. So my relationship with my father was, one of my other biggest lesson in this lifetime. And it's interesting that he was the one, that I went to ask for help in that time of need. But I worked for my father for 22 years, up until that point. When I left work, when he came to 12-step me, we call it, on that Friday, and I went to that place in Kent, Connecticut, I never went back to work again. I thought I was going back Monday to continue my life, but that's not the way it happened. The Spirit had other plans. But there was always this underlying stuff. My father wasn't a very emotional man, very distant. At about 11 years old, I remember, I don't know if I was 11 or maybe, around that time, I was walking up the stairs and I asked my father the question. I said, hey, Pop, what happens when we die? And he told me that we rot in the ground, and I believed my father, and I was terrified. From that moment forward, I had a whole different outlook on the world. And so all that stuff kind of started to change, through this experience. Well, my relationship with my father, I went back and I had to explain to him. I said, listen, Dad, I don't think I'm ever coming back to work again after 22 years. And, I had this deep belief that my father was trying to control my life. I have an authority. I had a huge one, and it's getting better, the authority problem. But I had that deep belief with my father, and all I ever did was seek for his love and approval. And it took me into working for him for 22 years when it wasn't my passion. I went to a college I didn't want to go to because he said, why don't you go to business school and run the business? And I said, okay, because I desperately wanted his approval. And so as this process of healing started, he didn't understand at the beginning, nor did I really, but he supported me. And, there was still some of the elements of that belief in my mind that he wanted to control my life by, hey, why don't you do this? Why don't you do this? And so every week he would say, I want you to come over on Wednesday. You got to have dinner with your mother. You owe it to her. And, all this. So literally for my whole life, I went there every Wednesday night for dinner. And every night I went there was a little list next to the spot I sat with insurance and all these questions. Well, if you're not going to work, how are you going to do this? And so there was still some healing around that. I went to a retreat in Mexico with the Living Miracles community, and I sat for about 4 days in my room, and I really used the tools, the levels of mind that they have, the turnarounds, and the different things that were given to question these beliefs in our mind. And I went after that one. I said, okay, I want to be wrong about my father wants to control my life. And I wrote it down, and, and I'm going through it. And I had so much rationalization at that point that I was like, well, and I forced myself, in the work of Byron Katie and those things, to do the turnarounds of coming up with examples of how he didn't, or how I want to, and all that stuff. And it took me days to come up with 3. It literally did. And I went through it, and nothing profound happened in my awareness at the moment. It wasn't like, pop, wow, I feel better. But don't you know that when I returned home after that week, he never asked me to come to dinner again. I went there by my own volition. the list was gone, my experience was starting to change. I was like, wait a minute, this stuff actually works, and it was really incredible. And then I started noticing things. My father asking me for advice. He wasn't the type of guy that asked for advice. And so this continued. And certainly when I left the East Coast and I went and lived in a spiritual community setting for many years. And, he would ask me at the beginning, call me every week and this. And then I started to see he continued. My belief went from he's trying to control that he's trying to support me. I realized he's the biggest angel I have on this planet. And, he would continue to pay me. I literally have moments that's, hey, listen, I don't need the credit card for gas anymore. I'm taken care of. God's got me, But I started this whole, lifetime obsession with that belief began to shift. And still there was a desire to be understood or approved because of I'm following God. And here's a man who is, essentially an atheist or believes he is. And so, he can't talk to his friends about me the way he used to and, taking over the business and all this. So there was still something there. And that continued to heal with me, continuing to question it. But it wasn't until recently that I went home. I went on a prison tour. I go every, couple, 3 months. And I go through, they call it the East Coast, but it's Ohio. For me, that's not the East Coast. But I'm close enough, so I fly over once in a while. So this was the last time. I hadn't seen them in 2 years. And I showed up at their house in Rhode Island. And when I got there, I actually had some actual healing moving through myself. So my parents kind of greeted me. It was about 9:00 at night. And I said, hey guys, listen, if you hear me crying downstairs, don't worry. I'm just letting some healing move through. And my father, makes a comment. Yeah, all right. Good luck with my mother not getting involved. Good luck with that. And they kind of go upstairs. And so the next day we're out to lunch and I'm sharing. My mother asks me, she's very interested. What do you mean about the healing moving through? So I tried to explain to her that allowing these emotions to come up rather than judgment, tried to give her a context about, allowance of this stuff. And in my perception, my father is arms crossed at the table, looking out the window, looking at his phone like this guy's not paying attention, or doesn't care, but this man, I realize now, he is always paying attention. And so the very next day, I was only there for 2 days. It was a Sunday night. And this was only 6 months ago. I sat at the kitchen table and my father had lost a friend in Rhode Island, one of his, what he calls cronies, old fishing friends down there. And my father opened up to me at the kitchen table and he started to cry. And I mean, quivering chin, something I've never witnessed. And when this happened, that sense of the spirit filled me. And I was like, whoa, and all I did was hold the space. I didn't say anything. I was just like, this is what all my training was for. And I sat there and don't you know, that was the moment. That was the only moment in the life that I felt my father approved of me by this simple act of my father showing that he trusted me enough to express. And something happened in my mind at that moment. And I was like, wow. It is not what I thought. I could have worked for 40 years, retired, done everything, and still never gained it. And by following God's path and this simple act of two people joining together was when I felt it. And so that's been the most profound shift, gradual in my awareness with my forgiveness so far.
How beautiful and satisfying that moment is. And it reminds me of one of my favorite lines from the Course. When I am healed, I am not healed alone. Mm. Our minds are joined, and we know that as students of A Course in Miracles, we accept it, but we have to constantly remind ourselves to move into it. And it's when we have experiences like that that we realize our minds are one. And in your particular case, and everyone is different in their ego, but in your particular case, you both were in spirit at exactly the same moment. And it was only through the act of his vulnerability and maybe even at times he was afraid of you. That has happened to people before. I've realized it happened to me, that he realized he could let all of that go. So sometimes the past, letting go of the past is an actual exercise that we perform over and over again. And sometimes it just manifests like that. And thank you so much for telling us that.
Thank you.
Yeah, that is such a beautiful story, Jeffrey. And in your story in particular, it's just so clear that I was kind of visualizing like a train track, like, and how you just went onto a different track after that rehab experience with your parents there. Like, you didn't go back to work, you turned your life over. What is this third step is made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God. And you took that step very literally, it sounds like, and moved over to a total spiritual way of life and service. One thing that you mentioned there that I didn't want to let pass is that you said, I want to let that up. I want to let these emotions up and these feelings up. And we don't talk about that too much. Our daily life is what the Course calls the dream we gave away. And what you're referring to, I think, is the dream we dream in secret, the unconscious mind, and what's down there. Can you just talk about like what you're meaning when you're saying you're letting that up more specifically?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, it's exactly what you said. It is the unconscious, the dream we dreamed in private. But again, I see them all as these emotions or beliefs that, are unquestioned. And sometimes when I hold on to them, they come up as strong emotion when I'm not willing to let them go. And so the process that, again, I've learned it through, the 12 steps and the Course in Miracles. I see them, you said they're very, I see them as identical, actually, that they, the 12 steps calls it causes and conditions. The Course in Miracles says obstacles to peace. But I'm just trying to clear the channel so that I can hear his voice to direct me. And, I've had the fortunate time in community where I've been able to allow those emotions in an environment of, what they call expression sessions. And we use something called the clarity process where, without judging, and you see your brother not judging it. Well, when I'm judging it in my own mind, that's what holds on to it for me. So as long as I'm labeling these things that I feel, I'm not willing to feel them or release them, just to at least bring them up into my awareness, because I've hidden them for so long. And so that's really all I meant by it was, just allowing what is to, how I feel. My biggest experience with that was, I know Judy has seen Take Me Home. And in that movie, I had to face a huge belief, and there was a belief in betrayal, something that I had experienced in prior relationships, and I knew that it wasn't going to go away, or I could just make a decision in mind that yes, I can trust people. No, that's not. That experience for me that I spoke of didn't stay like people like Eckhart Tolle or whatever. I had the awareness of it for quite some time, but then these beliefs came back to my mind, and I have to walk back through them and question them and see that they're not true. And, that was a big time for me to face that belief. And let me tell you, if you were around me for that month, I had a lot of emotion coming up and a lot of anger, jealousy, hatred, which is ultimately all self-hatred, but this is the way it shows up for me, at least.
Wow. Jeff, you mentioned or alluded twice already to your life's work now, and you also talked about a prison tour. Do you want to tell us a bit about your work in the prisons?
Sure. Yeah. So I had heard a while back, it was actually in San Francisco. I went up to the Community Miracle Center when they put on that one, their convention in San Francisco. I went to support David Hoffmeister. And when I was there, I started to hear the words prison ministry. And I didn't know what it meant at the time. And a couple other people even said something to me, hey, are you taking over Joe Wolf's ministry? And I was like, what are these people talking about? And so it was that time that it first came into my mind. And then a prisoner from Ohio wrote to David. His name is Dale Crow. He was a heavyweight boxer contender that went inside for over 20 years. And I started communicating with him and continued to hear this in my mind that I should start a prison ministry. And I didn't know what it meant even then. And so over the past year and a half, I've been here in Nevada, and that's what I've been devoting my time to. And I've started a nonprofit here. I've, with COVID, I wasn't allowed in the prisons in Nevada. And at first I was like, wait, so what do you want me to do if I'm here and I can't go in? And so it was one-on-ones. And so I started building these relationships. And for me, it started with Dale. And I was like, wait, my relationship with God is my relationship with my brother. So my whole prison ministry is this one relationship. And when I focused on that, and every call we had, that came in, it was like, it started to expand. And so now, I work with prisoners in many states, Connecticut, Florida, Texas, Ohio, Indiana. And it seems that it's starting to expand. But right now, most of it is one-on-one work. I have video calls with them. I have telephone calls every day. In fact, this is my time. They all know, or should know, that I'm talking with you guys today. But from 10 o'clock to 1 o'clock is the window that they call me during the day, so I can be present and settled at my desk when they call. And then, of course, a lot of snail mail, a lot of letters go out. And then I go on tours and I visit them one-on-one to just kind of go deeper into some of these topics. And it has been so rewarding. And I work with people that are in for the rest of their life. I work with people that I never would have had a chance to interact with and question these beliefs on such a deep level. I have this one guy, Rob, who went in at 19, and he got a 51-year sentence for a nonviolent crime. And so he's got a huge belief that the system has treated him badly. Beware of the temptation, perceive your brothers as unfairly treated. Well, this is a great opportunity to question that one. And the last time I sat with him, he was able to start to question it. And let me tell you, at first it was arms crossed, sit back, the fire. But beyond that, I can see a glimmer in this guy's eyes, and he wants it. And, I started him off with, when we first started, I started him off with the peaceful warrior. Now he's reading the course. He's into every lesson. He's calling me, asking me what this means and this, sharing his experiences. And now he's getting down to the deeper beliefs, and he's starting to question this one, that the system, so he can really get in touch with, what we all want is that freedom of the mind. And he's a great example of it. And I actually just got the letter that will be opening up here in Nevada. So in the state that I'm in, I can't do one-on-ones. I can only do sessions. So in the state of Nevada, I'm going to start off in the north. I have 4 facilities that I've been accepted into by the chaplains, because I'm able to go in through the religious services since I received a minister symbol from Living Miracles. So I go in through the chaplain's office, and I'm able to go weekly and have these guys come in to take them through A Course in Miracles, start them off. And yeah, that's kind of where it's at right now. And yeah, it's new every day. I'm just trying to follow the guidance with every moment.
Oh, Jeff, I'm sitting here with my mouth open because you're bringing back so much of my past. In 1982, a very, very interested Course in Miracles student who was a lawyer approached our tiny, tiny Foundation for Inner Peace. It was just at the time my husband, Bob Scutch, my ex-husband, and I, and he came over and said, I have access to the prisoners at San Quentin, because we're in California. And Bob Scutch was very interested. He said, in what way? And he said, I want to bring them A Course in Miracles. Can you supply me with books? And Bob said, well, certainly, we have been sending books to people in prison as a gift of love or a scholarship copy since we first published it. And yes, of course. It turned out that over the next few years, my ex-husband went with this other Bob into the prisons every week. And we actually filmed a group that was part of the early film called The Story of A Course in Miracles, Part 1 and Part 2. One is the Forgotten Song. The second part is the song Remembered. The Forgotten Song is the whole story of A Course in Miracles and how it came to be, with Bill Thetford, who was one of the 2 co-scribes telling the story. And Part 2 is different people in those early days who were taking the Course into their lives and using it in their, not only in their healing, but in their professions. And we picked a bunch of them, and one of them was the prison group. So I was there at the filming, and I was in a few times and watched what they were doing. And it was so moving. And maybe a year after that, I get a letter, "Dear brother," because the course calls us brothers. "Dear brother, I am a lifer at Louisiana State Prison. And I want to tell you, I read an article in Psychology Today. In fact, it was a cover story, and it said, 'The Gospel According to Helen.' And this magazine caught my eye because I said, wow, I know about that magazine. I'm not too interested in it, but what's the Gospel According to Helen?" So he started to read a pretty negative article about the whole scribing and the story and what A Course in Miracles was about, with more tongue in cheek than experiencing, appreciation of the course. He said to me in the letter, "If this national magazine could diss this course, whatever it is, I got to have it." And I found out that my new brother, Wesley Saunier, was quite a rebel. And he was imprisoned at the age of 18 because of a bar fight when and he has said, I was a runty guy, and someone attacked the young woman I was with, and I lost it. There was a knife on the top of the bar where they're cutting lemons, and I just picked it up and I plunged into him because I couldn't possibly fight with him or protect her. So it was a crime of passion, but he got life. And we were in contact a few letters a week, and eventually he would call me collect every Thursday. And we became as one. And when my husband and I had to go visit his stepmother, who lived in Mississippi, at a little gathering, I met a guy who had his own plane, and I said something about Wesley, and he was interested. He said, "I'll fly you into the prison." So we were flown into the prison, my husband and I, and the chaplain greeted us and the warden greeted us. And then we were introduced in person finally to Wesley. And he and I had 2 hours to talk, to meditate together, and to realize when we saw each other, we looked totally beyond our bodies. We just saw this love that had been exposed between us and augmented over the years of talking and also of writing. And actually, the chaplain and the warden, he finally came up for parole, which I thought was impossible. And many people wrote about the dramatic change in this young rebel who was always very argumentative, and people didn't even like to be in the room with him, who was leading A Course in Miracles group at the prison himself. And he actually was paroled. And the first thing he wanted to do was to come and live with me, which wasn't probably the best idea. And it turned out the Holy Spirit knew what it was doing, and he and I did not. And it was right for him to stay where he was born and go through healing with a lot of people. And in the end, and this is not a sad story, in the end, he and his brothers stole their uncle's station wagon. And since he was on probation, they were both put back in prison. And he died not long after that of a stomach ulcer. He said to me, my life's work was in the prison. And once they released me, I had no function. Amazing what happens in life. And so you can understand why I'm so drawn to what you're doing and so grateful, so very grateful that there are people like you, Jeff, who know and listen to what they are given to do as their life's work and touch so many people by it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that story, Judy. That's one I'm sure I'll share with the guys. And, you know, Dale being my first, the first one I started the relationship with. Today, he is in charge of programming for the entire prison. He has classes twice a week with over 15, 20 students arriving to each one. I send the course and into all those guys. And it's really blossomed. And even Dale is up this 27th he has a judicial review. And, that's what we look at. I say, hey, let's watch the expectations. And he's like, wherever your work is supposed to be, you might need to spend the next 4 years. That's the remainder of his sentence.
Yeah.
And he literally is so open-minded. He's like, yeah, wherever he wants me, and it's just such a change to watch that grow up. And it's like around me, as a reflection of my own mind. And I just, I'm actually going to order, I may call Bob today, because I can't get a book into this one prison in Florida. And this gentleman, oh my God, the humbleness of this guy. So I watch a video on YouTube of a gentleman from California that stood at this guy's sentencing and said, I forgive you. I'm studying this book called A Course in Miracles, and I forgive you and it was it was a double homicide, and it was the murder of his brother. And so I watched that video. And so I heard, okay, let me send this guy a letter. And I sent him a letter, and he responded instantly. And he's got life without parole in Florida. And he's just like, yes, I'm I told him I saw the video, and I said, do you remember a guy mentioned a book called this? And he goes, I'm very interested. I want to know what you're teaching. I'll give you updates exactly where I'm at. And so I've been trying to, some prisons don't take Amazon and all different things. So I have to get one into, and that's what I have to do after this call, actually.
And so it goes.
Yeah.
Don't you sometimes find yourself wearing a smile of gratitude?
Oh, very often. In fact, I have a letter on my desk right now from a gentleman who I went and visited in Houston. And he also sends me, every time he sends me a correspondence, there's an update. I'm on this section of the text, and this section of this lesson, and, this is what's going on in my mind. And so this one is about, he was up for his, he's got this situation in Texas as a yearly standing for parole, and he got refused. And so the first paragraph is maybe 3 sentences with the complaint, like, yeah, and I, this and this, and then straight into gratitude. I have this, I have you, I have a loving and supporting mother. And he just went straight in, and I'm reading this, like bursting over. Here's a guy that just got told he's got to stay in prison, and his answer is to tell me what he's grateful for. And I'm like, oh, yeah, it's yes, I have that smile of gratitude quite often. Every time I walk to the mailbox too.
Yeah, we share that. I too. Well, just keep on doing what he tells you to do. Obviously, we are all so grateful for it, even people who don't know about it.
Indeed. Well, Jeff, one more tip I was hoping to get out of you here before we wrap up, and that is, we're all tempted to, believe in this dream. And sometimes we get caught up in anger and guilt, and we forget it's like the course seems like a million miles away, and we just want to, we want to jump in the mud and just get all dirty and just feel the pain, and we forget about it. How do you bring yourself back? How do you kind of stop, drop, and roll and bring yourself back to course principles when you get into that state?
Sure. Yeah, I actually have a little what works for me, and it's actually what I started this little service session thing for what I teach what I would learn. So I teach the people what I do to get back to the present moment, and I actually use this starts with this as soon as I wake up every day. And of course, if I drift from it, I go back to it. But there's 7 sections of the course that I resonate very highly with. And I practice those. Like, I read them each morning, not the full thing, a paragraph from each. And those are the ones that kind of just reel me in, and the second one of those is the problem and the answer. And if I just read that section, I mean, he literally tells me there, you may think this course is hard, but have you done it?
Mm-hmm.
And so if the 3 that I use to keep it even more practical is problem and the answer, which comes out of chapter 11. So I read that just to remind myself that, wait a minute, do I want because most of the time I want the problem. That's my problem. And so I read problem and the answer, and that gets me back to like, oh yeah. And then I go straight to setting the goal and rules for decision. And if I practice those things, they literally, setting the goal is literally in rules for the decision as well, the way that's set up. But he literally guides me back to the moment. And I am a huge advocate of rules for decision. I shared how I got to this point. It was by following directions in the big book of 12-step program, Well, that's what I need to continue to do, is follow directions. And there, for me, that section works for me because there is nothing more practical than what he says in that section. And I can actually see, it brings me to a place where I can see that I'm valuing the valueless. It actually shows me, even the introduction to that section in chapter 30 tells me that I have to make this a habit. And so that I try to do that. And when I lose my way, he tells me in there, perhaps at least I can decide I don't like the way I feel right now. So it's just another, it's an in-depth way for this complex mind to return to being happy rather than right, because that's all that's going on in those moments. And so I'm eternally grateful for that section, because that's the one that I always talk to people and work with people to get them back to the moment. So that would probably be my answer to your question, Matt.
Perfect. Very helpful, very practical. Judy, any comments?
Oh, I want this to continue. Oh, I really, really do want to thank you, Jeff, for everyone who's listening, and certainly on behalf of Matt, who told you so, and myself, for helping lift us to being able to feel what you're doing, to be part of it through you, and to just be so very, very grateful.
Thank you. Thank you both. This has been an honor.
Well, Jeff, before we let you go, please give out your URL for the prison work you're doing and let people know how they can connect with you.
Sure. It's last, LAST dash step, STEP.org, laststep.org with a dash in between.
Well, Jeff, thanks so much for your miracle voice coming on and sharing about your stories of healing, how you got into this. This was very moving for me, and I'm sure the listeners feel the same way. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening today. Please subscribe to Miracle Voices by hitting the subscribe button on your podcast app. If you are enjoying these conversations, please consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever podcast app you use. And lastly, please visit us at miraclevoices.org and join our newsletter so we can stay connected. Until the next podcast, I want to leave you with my favorite course quote: "When you want only love, you will see nothing else."